Hospitals. It's in serious debt, and Patientline has been heavily criticised for the cost of its calls. Now, former employees of the company have told us how they were pressurised to sell this system to patients on hospital wards. Peter Troy worked for Patientline for 18 months at a hospital in Middlesbrough. He says his job changed from simply helping patients use the equipment to direct sales.
My concern was that the culture was changing. It was becoming high pressure sales, and I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with it.
Peter says staff were given sales targets and were told to approach every patient in every bed.
To obtain the performance figures that they expected, then by definition you're having to approach everybody.
Another former employee who didn't want to be identified told us what he'd seen on the ward.
It reminded me of sort of like a cold calling job, going from door to door, except with this it was going from patient to patient. Didn't matter how ill they looked. I'd see people who I really just thought should not be getting approached. They need to get rest. They were obviously just out of surgery, on respirators, struggling to breathe.
So, is Patientline aggressively selling to patients? Well, this is a newsletter sent to all staff in March this year. It talks about changing the company to create a sales-driven culture. And specifically it says every individual in Patientline will be accountable for direct selling. For the health union Unison, a hospital ward is no place for sales.
I think it's absolutely appalling. When somebody's sick in hospital, the last thing they want is somebody coming at them, selling them these cards or telling them what they can and can't do.
Patientline admits they've become more sales-focused, but they say staff are told to act responsibly.
I think we as a company have been very, very clear with our management structure and the people that are in our hospitals about the sensitive nature of the environment we're trying to operate in.
Hospital bosses in Middlesbrough have met Patientline managers and are now working on a code of conduct for Patientline staff.
And Graham's here now. Morning, Graham. Why is Patientline doing this?
Well, Bill, they're heavily in debt. They're a private company. They're £80 million in debt. They say they've invested a great deal of money into the NHS and they need to recoup their costs. They make no bones about the fact that they've changed the culture of the company and they have made sales and targets much more important for their staff on the hospital ward. And they say there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they have a commercial model and they need to get their money back. They say they've got a good product to sell. And so long as staff are acting responsibly and sensitively, they say it's absolutely fine. The Department of Health this morning is saying that it's up to local trust to determine how Patientline staff operate on the ward, so hospitals need to come up with some agreement with Patientline about how staff behave. But the Patients Association this morning are absolutely livid about this. They say these patients are ill, they're recovering from operations, they're a captive audience, some of them are elderly, may not know exactly what they're getting themselves into, and they say this is an inappropriate way to behave in hospitals.
OK, Graham, thanks very much. We'll put some of those points in a few minutes to Patientline's Commercial Director, Charlotte Brown.
Now, though, 12 minutes past 7. For some people, its services are a lifeline during a stay in hospital.
But a breakfast investigation has found that Patientline, the company which provides bedside phones in many NHS hospitals, is using hard sell tactics on patients. Its Commercial Director, Charlotte Brown, is here. Good morning, Charlotte. We've seen the report and spoken to Graham about the allegations. Is a hospital ward where there are very ill and vulnerable people the right place for salespeople to be patrolling up and down looking for customers?
Well, I think it's, as you've said there, it is a sensitive environment and one that we're acutely aware of because Patientline have been operating in this environment for over 12 years now. And we know that the area we work in is patients are often elderly, vulnerable and unwell. And our staff are absolutely sensitive to working in that environment. I think it's worth pointing out here that Patientline provides service to over 8 million people who use it in the NHS across the course of a year.
But is the company, if the staff are being sensitive, is the company being sensitive by imposing targets on staff, having bonuses and competitions and saying that they should approach every patient in every bed?
Well, I don't think that that's actually true. We have, as I say, we have 1,000 staff in the field, and the majority of them are very well aware of our guidelines on how to approach a ward. When you go into the ward, you talk to the nursing staff, you ensure that it's appropriate to talk to patients. But if you're sick and vulnerable in hospital, sometimes it can be really valuable to be able to watch EastEnders, make a call, get a call from a loved one.
Without having it pressed upon you, it's a call surely patients should make for themselves without having somebody come round to their bed and say...
You showed a picture of our system, and sometimes when you are feeling vulnerable and ill, you need to be shown how to use it, and that is the prime job of our staff. We make absolutely clear that their job is to show people how to access these services. And can I say, out of the 8 million people that we've serviced over the course of the year, in the last 3 months since we've changed our approach, we've had 2 issues raised by patients about our staff. So I think that's evidence that actually our staff are acting incredibly sensitively and responsibly in helping patients.
To be honest, though, you're a business. You're in the business to make money. The company's in debt, so you've got to do what you can. This is not really about benefiting the patients. It's about getting some business in, isn't it? This is why you've changed your tactic to harder sales.
I think there are 2 points here, actually. It is actually about benefiting the patient, because if we don't do what our patients are asking or what our customers are asking, then they simply won't use the service, and that is what we're trying to do. But the fact that you put there is very important, because Patientline, as is well known, has spent £180 million putting this service into the NHS, and you know, it's designed to provide TV and a telephone for patients, but also it was designed at the government's request to be able to view things like electronic patient records and x-rays at the bedside. And the government have decided not to purchase those services. So Patientline are finding responsible ways to engage patients in the phone and the TV service so that we can provide this service.
Well, the big question mark is over the responsible part, isn't it? Because
Yes.
the union say it's absolutely appalling. The Patients Association say this is an inappropriate way to behave in hospitals, particularly many patients, elderly, may not understand what they're getting themselves into.
Absolutely, and I think, Bill, if we were behaving like that, I would absolutely agree that it would be completely irresponsible. But 2 patient complaints out of the 8 million in the year that on the way our staff behave, I think our record is unbelievably good.
Well, you may say 2 patient complaints, but Unison in Middlesbrough alone have had 2 Patientline staff come to them with issues, not the ones that we interviewed. So
I think our staff, that's quite interesting actually, because we've got over 1,000 staff and they've been quite unsettled and bruised by we have had a lot of negative media publicity over the last few months, and this change in culture, we're asking our staff to behave less like members of the NHS and more like people who work for a commercial organisation. And we've tried to do that in a very sensitive way, but it is difficult for people.
Is a hospital ward the place for a commercial organisation to be operating in the way that you are?
Well, I suppose then you come back to the government actually engaging a commercial company to spend the 180 million that we've done. Because ultimately, if the government were to spend that, that would take the money away from essential care in the NHS.
Okay. Charlotte Brown, thank you very much.
Thank you.